Cindy Speaker, and I have with me today as my guest attorney Bill Kowalczyk of Michael J. O'Connor and Associates. And Bill is a workers' compensation attorney who's going to talk with us about a very, very timely topic, and that is violence in the workplace and how workers' compensation benefits can sometimes interact with that. So, Bill, thanks for being with us today.
My pleasure, Cindy. Always good to see you and to talk about this area of the law.
Yeah, you as well. Well, I've had questions in light of some of the horrible mass shootings and things like that have gone on. So let's start off by looking at that type of a scenario. If a mass shooting were to occur, and unfortunately it has, in Pennsylvania, what are the implications for employees?
Right. And so there are many implications, but one of the things that occurred to me is that when we hear news of these mass shootings, it's always from the perspective of what a tragedy it was for lives to be lost, often young lives.
Mm-hmm.
And we hear about gun control and everything. But what had occurred to me is that almost all of these places where these shootings happen are workplaces.
Yes.
And there are people who are there doing their job, and it's interrupted by this horrible violence. So they obviously have rights unique to an employee in Pennsylvania, rights that other people who were not there working don't have. So
okay. Yeah.
I thought about that originally. And of course, if it's, say, a school or a hospital or a church, and you have people who work there, teachers, doctors, the minister, the janitor, the security guard. These are all people on the job. Now, generally, just the general statement of the law is, and there's going to be some exceptions, and we'll get to that later, but if violence erupts at your workplace and you are either injured or killed, you're covered by the Workers' Comp Act in general. Now, what exactly does that mean? So, as far as injuries are concerned, obviously some people may get shot and not die, and they may then be unable to work. That's a physical injury. And of course, that's the same as any other work injury. It disables you. Now, if you die, and I'll get into this later, there's a whole section of the Workers' Comp Act on death benefits and what the individual's family is entitled to, assuming that they have a family.
Yeah.
So one of the things that happens too when I think about these, we talk about these terrible shootings and violence in the workplace. And even if it isn't a mass shooting, any type of violence in the workplace that involves firearms often leaves scars on the people that are not physical, that are mental,
right.
Post-traumatic stress disorder, things like that. It's very common. It's like being in a war.
Right.
So those type of non-physical injuries could potentially be covered, but there are, again, exceptions. And one of the things I want to talk about is that these are what are called mental injuries. You suffer a mental stress, i.e., you're somewhere in a public place that's there's a shootout, and you suffer a mental injury as a result. You didn't get shot, but you're stressed out by the whole thing, and you seek treatment. Now, one of the things that's always been in the Pennsylvania Workers' Comp Act is it's a separate threshold for mental injuries. Those of us in the business don't really believe it's fair, but to prove a mental injury, not only do you have to have corroboration of your symptomatology or of the problems that brought it on, but you also have to prove what is called an abnormal working condition. So the interesting thing here is, in the context, say, of a school, it is abnormal for a teacher to have to face gunfire.
Right.
I would think the court would find that if a teacher or a janitor became disabled mentally due to having to be in a shootout, they'd be entitled to benefits as they can prove that is an abnormal working condition. However, it's specifically been held in Pennsylvania that police officers who face fire do not suffer an abnormal working condition. That's normal. That's part of the job. So you can envision a situation where there's an armed police officer at a school who's involved in the shooting. He's not entitled to benefits for mental stress.
Wow.
But the teacher would be. So that's one of the things that occurred to me. Now, this standard, a lot of us in this business think it is wrong. And one of my colleagues told me recently that he is contesting this the whole way to the Supreme Court. He has a case where an individual had to witness a horrible event in the course of her employment as a social worker, whatever, and she became mentally disabled, but she didn't get benefits because it was not an abnormal working condition. And he's saying that that requirement is unconstitutional.
Yeah.
And hopefully, maybe later this year, we'll hear more about that case.
So.
And if that changes the
awful.
law, that'll help a lot of people. So anyway, let's get back to what happens if, in fact, employees are killed at work. Their surviving family members are entitled to benefits. Now, one of the problems with the Pennsylvania Workers' Compact is you have to prove that you have dependents. So if you're married, that individual could get the benefits. If you have children who are dependent upon you, they could get it. If you have children who are in loco parentis, which means you're acting in the role of a parent for them, maybe they're not your children, maybe you're just watching your brother's children or whatever. That could be. There could be other people who are not even related to you, who you are taking care of, who might be entitled to benefits. Sometimes people's parents are entitled to benefits because they are also dependent upon them.
Yeah.
It's not automatic. So if you have siblings or you have parents that survive you but no wife and kids, those siblings and parents don't necessarily get the benefits automatically. They have to prove dependency, and that's hard. So that's kind of a gap. There are people, and I've had these cases, people die in the course of their employment and no one gets any benefits because there are no dependents left. So, that's one of the things to look out for in Pennsylvania. It doesn't absolutely cover everyone.
Yeah.
So,
that's mass shootings. What about if there's a single assailant?
Oh, right. So, we're talking about this in terms of some kind of mass shooting or involving a lot of people. There's a lot of violence in the workplace that doesn't involve, a lot of people.
Yeah.
It involves maybe one person against another.
Right.
You get that a lot. And it could be as simple as two guys at a factory getting a fist fight.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if one of these guys gets injured, whether he gets benefits is dependent upon a lot of things. And one of the things very important here is the personal animus defense. Personal animus means you have something personal against another person. So, for instance, you work at a particular place and you have a conflict with an individual. That individual is ultimately fired because you pushed management to get rid of him. And he resents it. 2 days later, he comes back in with a gun and he shoots you and only you. Is that death compensable, is the question. And the answer is yes, because the reason he shot you, and this is weird, you have to uncover this to get the guy's family benefits. Why did he shoot him? He shot him because of the job, because he lost his job because this individual complained to management. That would be a compensable death. However, say a man comes in with a gun and shoots another man at a factory because he just found out that man is having an affair with his wife. That's personal animus, and that is not a work-related death. So, while it seems unfair, the insurance company can defend it if they can establish that the death
Wow.
was related to something personal. Now, and this also occurred to me that this would come up even in mass shootings. Because, often one person will be violent against another because they
Right.
just hate the person.
Yeah.
Or it's because they have a dispute over how to do the job or something. So that depends on whether it's work related or not. But what about in these school shootings? Say, for instance, or a lot of these school or church or public shootings are revenge oriented.
Yes.
So you get someone, oh, he used to belong to the church. And that was that guy down in Texas, I think.
Right.
He had some connection to the church. He didn't
Right.
like,
The mother-in-law went to that church.
yeah, and he had a
Yeah.
dispute with her. So he goes in there, and if he kills the pastor based on revenge, on some personal matter, and if that was in Pennsylvania, there could be a defense. There could be no benefits because there was just personal animus. And say, for instance, you have as a contrast, you have that shooting in Las Vegas. If that was in Pennsylvania, I don't know if they ever uncovered any motivation for that.
Right.
So if you don't uncover a motivation, it's just random killing. And if, say, there's a roadie for a band who got shot dead during that assault, he would be entitled to workers' comp because there was no motive. And in fact, the shooter wouldn't have even known him. It was a random shooting.
Well,
So
can
the
I ask you a
motivation,
question?
well, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, let me ask you a question. So, if you take the shooting in Texas, where
Mhm.
the mother-in-law was a bit of the reason for the shooting because of the connection, that would be the personal animus. But if the pastor, and I don't remember who all actually died, but let's say the pastor dies and the mother-in-law dies, is there a
Right.
difference in the benefits that go to the family based on the personal animus connected with the mother-in-law, but not with the pastor?
Exactly. Exactly. And this is the kind of case that would end up in court. There'd be
Okay.
all kinds of testimony about what the motivation was. Did he know the pastor? Did he
Uh-huh.
have resentment? Was he shooting up the church because of the function of the church? And does that make it work related? There'd be all
Wow.
kinds of. It could really get interesting.
Yeah.
And when I think about even school shootings too, often we'll get a student come into a school and shoot a teacher who he didn't like. Now, what if that happened? Now, why didn't he like that teacher? We'd have to get into all that.
Right.
What if he shot the football coach because he cut him from the team? Well,
Yeah.
that seems work related. That's the job of a coach. But what if he just didn't like a particular class and he shot it up? See, all this with motivation becomes relevant when
Yeah.
we're talking about workplace violence.
What if it's an employee that does the shooting?
Right, that's another interesting thing. Right, so that could let's just envision a situation where an employee, and this is another thing that I thought of, comes in to the workplace and commits violence. What if that employee either is injured during the course of that or commits suicide? And that's so if during the course of a workday, one employee becomes violent, and say, for instance, someone defends themselves and injures or kills that employee, is that employee assailant entitled to any type of benefits? Now, normally we'd say, of course not. Why would they be? And the answer usually is yes, because just because you killed yourself in the course of your employment doesn't mean your widow would necessarily have the right to sue for workers' comp benefits, because there is a specific exclusion in the Pennsylvania Workers' Comp Act for suicide.
Okay.
Also, there's an exclusion for violation of the law. It doesn't usually come up. But say, for instance, an individual is driving in the course of his employment. He's going 90 miles an hour in a 50-mile-per-hour speed zone, and he crashes. His violation of the law may have taken his life, and he can't get benefits. Same thing with a shooter. You come in and violate the law, and the security guard puts you down. you can't then get workers' comp benefits because you initiated it with a violation of the law. So
Okay.
that's another part of it. Now, when we talk about um, these mass shootings and what's the redress for these people? Obviously, if you work there, Pennsylvania has workers' comp coverage. But, there's all types of other, and we've talked about this before, third-party liability.
Yeah.
So people who were injured in the course of their employment may also sue the gun manufacturers. They may sue the police. And in that thing in Parkland, apparently the police and the FBI had prior knowledge of the violent tendencies of this individual. They're going to be subject to lawsuits. So if an individual has workers' comp and they sue, again, that comes into play. Those benefits coordinate. There's subrogation back and forth. And when terrible things like this happen, believe me, there are people who will look for a guilty party to sue. And that always happens.
Sure. Bill,
Now,
what if it's...
Go ahead. No.
I was going to say, what if it's a hostile act? What if 9/11 were to happen? What are the implications there?
Right, exactly. So some of these mass shootings could be considered terrorism. Say, for instance, we think about there was a workplace in San Bernardino that was shot up. 14 people died. And it was by jihadists. So that was classified as terrorism by the federal government. Now, what about those people who were at the workplace? Are they entitled to the same benefits? Section 301 of the Pennsylvania Workers' Comp Act provides that no benefits shall be paid to victims who are injured or killed during a hostile act against the United States by enemy forces or sabotage. Now, what exactly does this mean? I don't believe it's ever been tested. Obviously, it means if there's a war on the home front and the Russians invade Pennsylvania and everybody who's at work gets killed, they don't all get workers' comp benefits because it was an act of war. But on a smaller scale, what does it mean? If there's just a terrorist act at your workplace, can there be a defense that this was a hostile act against the peace and dignity of the United States as opposed to just a violent act directed at you? And I don't know the answer to that, but I find it interesting because if we had, God forbid, a terrorist act at a large workplace, say, for instance, machine gun fire at a plant by jihadists or people who were proclaiming that they were terrorists, they were ISIS, Al-Qaeda, whatever, and they just randomly killed people who were working, would they be entitled to death benefits? Would their family be entitled? And I think there's a possibility that the insurance company for that employer could defend it based on its sabotage against the United States.
Interesting.
However, I think if they did, there'd be so much public outcry that they might just pay it anyway, because nobody wants to see families suffer from this sort of thing. I would also point out that when 9/11 happened, the Twin Towers had all these people at work. These people were all at work. And I think that the same loophole in Pennsylvania existed in New York at the time that would prevent them from getting workers' comp benefits. So what happened there, the federal government created a fund, and it still exists to this day. The 9/11 fund, if you were afflicted by that in any way, injured, family member killed, you can apply to that fund for benefits because there is a gap. There is a gap. You think about the firefighters and everything who were up there. And there was insurance for them and all that, I know. But if workers' comp was denied, there's a fund. There's a fund for them.
That's very interesting. So 9/11, because of the fund that was set up, those people and their family members, if they were deceased, were covered. But if it had been litigated just on the basis of workers' comp, what you're saying is possibly because of the loophole, there
Yes,
may not have been compensation.
exactly. And if that was in Pennsylvania with the state of our act the way it is, I
Yeah.
could see it being a defense because
Wow.
that, they called it an act of war.
Right.
The government did, and
Yeah.
so there you go. Is that a defense? It
Boy,
may be. I
that's
know.
really something. What about sexual assault in the workplace?
Right, and again, here's another timely topic. We hear about it all the time, certainly in the movie industry.
That's for sure.
Yes. So what if you're working on a movie and Harvey Weinstein wants you to come up to his room and the whole problem with that.
Yeah.
And these
Yeah.
people, they end up with either physical injuries or psychological injuries or both.
All
And they're
these
still suffering from
gymnasts.
it years later.
Yeah.
And if it happened in the course of that work, would they be entitled to some type? But again, here's what we're talking about, the difference between sexual harassment and sexual assault. A physical assault, rape, that's going to be a work injury. Unless, and I can't imagine this happening, they're able to prove that the rape was a result of some, again, personal animus. You can see how we can get into this. Now, why does someone rape another person? Is it personal? Is it work related? Is it a power thing? I don't know. And I wouldn't even want to get in the middle of it.
Right.
But I would think that if a woman was raped by a co-employee, she'd be entitled to benefits for everything she suffered.
I would hope so.
But I do anticipate there might be some resistance.
Yeah. Yeah.
There is resistance on sexual harassment. We see it all the time.
Yes.
Because not only do you have to prove that sexual harassment is present in the workplace, you have to prove that it's an abnormal working condition and your psychological problems are related to that harassment. And sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't, depending on the severity of it,
Yeah.
how it's directed, the credibility of the people. Some people are overly sensitive. One dirty joke overheard over a period of 6 months is probably not enough. Direct harassment, attempting to get a woman to concede to your sexual wishes, probably is. So there's a whole spectrum here.
Yeah.
But again, that's violence in the workplace. And that is technically covered
Wow.
by the Workers' Comp Act.
Wow. Wow. What a topic. I mean, it's interesting, but it's also devastating to think about some of the things that can happen and the idea that that potentially people are not covered with any kind of benefits because of various types of loopholes. Another reason to get an attorney involved to sort this out.
Absolutely, I agree.
So complicated.
Yeah, it is, right.
So complicated.
Sure.
Let's turn our attention for a moment. Any new developments in workers' compensation law?
Yes, I've talked about this before, and it's basically the evidence-based medicine formulary. This is the bill that has passed in other states, and Pennsylvania is now trying. It's a Republican-sponsored Senate Bill 936. And for anyone who's interested and you want to contact your state legislator, it's Senate Bill 936 that seeks to take discretion out of injured workers' doctors' hands and put it into insurance companies such that the treatment you get, the pharmaceutical treatment, will be controlled by a formula. And the insurance company ultimately is trying to save money on this.
Yeah.
They say that they're trying to avoid opioid addiction, whatever, but it is a cost-saving move. And those of us who represent injured workers are against it. And as far as a call to action is concerned, I would say anyone who's interested should contact your local legislator in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Now, this came up a couple of weeks ago for vote, and it was 98 to 98. So
wow.
It did not pass. But I'm told that it's going to be up for reconsideration, so there's still time to prevent this. And this is just another example of chipping away at the rights of injured workers in Pennsylvania. These little amendments like this should be resisted.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
Right. Oh,
Bill,
and there's
Go ahead.
There's another one.
Oh.
So there's another bill that's pending right now. We have something in Pennsylvania called the Uninsured Employers Guarantee Fund. And that is funded by insurance companies to cover employers who have no insurance.
Yeah.
So if you get injured working for them, there's some fund for you, but that fund is depleted. and they're asking for the state government to provide funds. Now, in turn for that, the state government wants to put some other things in the law to limit these claims, which could be difficult because a lot of my clients who do work for uninsured employers are kind of out of luck. They
Wow.
need some type of help.
Wow.
But that's pending now too. And one thing when I was researching this, what I realized is I saw a statistic from a national organization that I'm involved in that said of small businesses in the United States, only 1 in 5 has workers' comp insurance.
Oh my word.
And we saw talking about small businesses, we might be talking about mom and pops. And if you're just self-employed, you don't have to cover yourself. You can opt out of that. But if you're small and you have a couple employees, the law requires you to cover them. But a lot of people violate that. So it's becoming a problem in Pennsylvania. There's more of these claims. There's less money. So
Yeah.
hopefully the legislature will address it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
This has been fascinating, Bill. Honestly, I can't wait to talk to you again. Really interesting stuff. So
Great.
timely. And
Excellent.
yeah, thank you so much for your
Mhm.
research and sharing your knowledge with us. Bill, if someone has specific questions, how can they reach you?
Well, we have an 800 number that will reach our main office, and you can ask for a consultation for one of our attorneys. And that means workers' comp, Social Security, motor vehicle, whatever you have that we cover. It's 1-800-518-4LAW, 4LAW. That's our 800 number. You can always find us on the web at o'connorlaw.com.
Excellent. Bill, thanks so much for your time today.
Sure. Good to see you.
You too. To those of you watching, I'm sure some of you have questions. Please put them on this page. We'll get them answered for you. Just put them in the comments section. Thanks everybody for being with us. Have a great day.